Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I am going to walk you through my inventory management API project built with ASP.NET Core using a multi-layer architecture. The goal of this project is to build a scalable and maintainable inventory management system while following clean separation of concerns. Currently, I have completed the categories module. In the next session, I will be working on products module. Let me show the project structure and explain how the request flows through the application. First, let's look at the overall solution structure. I have divided the application into multiple layers: domain layer, application layer, infrastructure layer, and API layer using controllers, not a minimal API. Each layer has a specific responsibility which helps keep the code clean, testable, and maintainable. Let's start with the domain layer. The domain layer is the core of the application. It contains business entities and domain rules. This layer doesn't depend on any other layer. Here I have entities such as category, products, suppliers, and so on and so forth. You can see. The domain layer represents the business model and remains independent from databases, frameworks, and external services. The purpose of this layer is to define what the business data looks like. Next, in the application layer, this layer contains application business logic. Here I have DTOs, interfaces, services, and exceptions. Instead of exposing entities directly, I use DTOs to transfer data between layers. For example, category DTO, category DTO, update category DTO, and so on. I also define interfaces here so that application layer doesn't directly depend on infrastructure implementations. For example, I category service, I application DB context, and so on. The service layer contains the actual use cases. For example, category service. This service handles operations like get categories by ID, update category, delete category, create category. Next is the infrastructure layer. This layer handles external concerns such as database access. Here I use entity framework core, DB context, configurations, migrations. The infrastructure layer implements interfaces defined in the application layer. Application DB context, for example. This layer is responsible for communicating with the SQL server and persisting data. Finally, we have the API layer. This is the entry point of the application. It contains controllers, dependency injection setup, middleware, Swagger configuration. Controllers receive HTTP requests and delegate work to the application layer. For example, categories controller. The controller remains thin because business logic is moved into services. Categories module flow. Now let me explain how the categories features works end to end. Client sends a request. Client sends an HTTP request. The request reaches the categories controller. The controller calls the category service through dependency injection. The service performs validation and business logic. It communicates with the database through the instruction interfaces. This keeps the application layer independent of infrastructure. The infrastructure layer executes entity from a core queries. The data is mapped into DTOs and returned back through service. Returned back through service to controller API response. Why this architecture? One common question: why we use multiple layers instead of putting everything inside controllers? The advantages are better maintainability, separation of concerns, easier testing, scalability, and cleaner code organization. As the project grows and more modules are added, this structure remains manageable. Currently, the categories module is completed and fully functional. I show how this is working and using Swagger UI. In the next video, I will implement the products module using the same architecture. The product features will include product entity, product DTOs, product service, product credit endpoints, relationship with categories. This will demonstrate how the architecture scales when new features are added. This is the current progress of the Inventory Management API project. Today I showed project architecture, domain layer, application layer, infrastructure layer, and API layer. And finally create categories credit flow. If you found the walkthrough helpful, feel free to like, subscribe, and follow the project updates. Thank you for being here with me. Bye.